There was a generation who didn't just watch movies. We were raised by them. And not in the background, not while scrolling, because that didn't exist, not while multitasking, because that's not something we cared to do. And movies weren't just something that we consumed. They shaped who we are. We lived with them. They shaped our imaginations, our friendships. They shaped how we saw the world. And whether or not we realized it at the time, we may have just been the last generation that experienced movies in that way. If you grew up in the 80s or 90s or even the 70s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Back then, it was a time when movies didn't just drop out on a handful of different random streaming services or video on demand or anything like that, and you didn't even know they existed. They arrived. I'm talking about they came down and arrived Independence Day at the White House style arrived. A trailer felt like a huge announcement. A date felt like a countdown you were waiting for. A movie in and of itself felt like something that you prepared for, you talked to your friends about, you got excited about. You maybe saw a teaser during prime time or ahead of another movie that you went out and saw. You saw the trailer, but you didn't see breakdown videos by hundreds of YouTubers or by critics who got their swag bag and a pre-screen copy. There weren't leaks like there is now. There weren't 50 different cuts of a TV spot. You just saw that and you waited. You went to the movies, you saw that trailer, and you started asking your friends, did you see it? Maybe you saw it on a VHS tape, usually a little small spot on a primetime series, commercial break. And the waiting built something fantastic that made the movies even bigger. Anticipation. By the time you sat in the theater seat, you were ready. I'm talking about ready to launch, ready. If you were a kid in the 80s, 90s, 70s, movies weren't background noise. They were milestones in your life. There isn't a kid that grew up back then that can't tell you exactly where they were the moment they first saw Jurassic Park, Jaws, Batman, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Back to the Future, the Star Wars re-releases or original releases in some of our cases, or The Lion King, or Lord of the Rings, Aladdin, anything like that. It wasn't just a movie itself. It was the experience around it, the anticipation, the sharing it with your friends, all of those things that sort of ingrained those films and those experiences within us, and we've never let it go. It shaped who we are, and that's why it's still so popular for so many of us today. All those movies and that time, they marked who we are. And that's the thing. Before streaming, before social media, before everything became so fragmented, we had a monoculture. I've talked about it before on here. We all saw the same movies. We got excited about the same movies. We talked about the same movies. We quoted the same lines. We talked about the same scenes. We rewound the same parts on VHS. You went to school on Monday morning and someone asked, "Hey, did you see it?" Whatever it was, Karate Kid, Jurassic Park, and everyone knew what it was. There wasn't like, what TV? There's so many times today I will talk to people about a TV series or a movie that they've never heard of, and they'll come back to me with one that I've never heard of. We were so fragmented, but that's not how it was then. Everybody knew what the it was that you were talking about because movies connected people in real time. Not through comment sections, not through leaks, not through reviews, all those kind of things, but through conversations, through sleepovers, through bus rides, through family living rooms, over dinner tables. They were a shared language. They shared our imagination together, and movies were such a huge part of that connection that did all of those things. If you want to talk about why or how we were raised by movies, you have to talk about the video store. Friday night, fluorescent lights, carpet that had seen decades of wear or at least looked like it, rows of VHS tapes staring back at you. You didn't scroll, you browsed. You often did it with your friends, showing each other the cover art. Sometimes you picked something out entirely based on how cool that box looked. Total legit way to do it. That's why all this art behind me still so powerful today. You took it home, you put it in, and you watched it. All of it. Even the slow parts, even the weird parts, because it was the movie you chose, you paid for, you went out and got. It was that act of commitment that built a relationship with movies. They weren't disposable, they mattered. And so you couldn't just click OK to watch, and after 45 seconds or 10 minutes, if it doesn't have your attention like you hoped, you just scroll on to the next thing. That was not something that you could do. You made your choice, you invested in it, you committed to it, and because of that, you experienced it the way it was supposed to be. And because you experienced even the weird movies, the ones maybe you didn't like, maybe something you weren't expecting, because you experienced them the way they were supposed to be, they taught us things. Patience is one that they taught us. Commitment is something else they taught us. But they also taught us imagination. They taught us courage, adventure, friendship, loss. We learned from Rocky. We learned from Indiana Jones. We learned from E.T. We learned from the Goonies, our Ferris Bueller's Day Off, our Stand By Me. We learned about friendships. We didn't just watch those characters, we absorbed them. We saw what it meant to be Rocky and to persevere and to realize that you have to prove nothing to anyone in the world except for yourself to be a success. We learned the value of friendship through Stand By Me and Goonies, and adventure from Indiana Jones, and heart from E.T. All of those things we learned by watching them. They became part of our mythology and helped shape who we are. They're modern fairy tales. And when you grow up in that environment, movies don't just become entertainment. They become a part of who you are. And going to the theater back then obviously felt way different than going to the theater now does, because if you were going, something big was playing, or it was months later and you were going to an old theater and paying $1 to see something big that you couldn't afford to go see to start with, or that you were going to see for the 20th time. You stood in line, you bought tickets, you sat in a packed room, you experienced it all together. The laughter spread through the theater, the scares, the gasps, the applause happened. You felt like the audience was reacting as one. They were going through the same emotions. And when the movie ended, you talked about it the whole way home and all week. The communal experience mattered. So what changed? Movies didn't disappear, obviously. There's actually more content being thrown out there than ever before, but it's just that. It's content. But the way we experience them changed the most, and that is the biggest problem, and how we made them, and that's a whole other discussion that I've been getting into on the channel. Streaming made everything available instantly. Phones divided attention. You started writing scripts so people could scroll their phone instead of telling a good story. Movies compete with social media, short form content that kills attention spans, notifications, multitasking. When everything is available all the time, an infinite amount, nothing feels rare. Nothing feels special. Nothing feels like an event. Nothing feels like something that we all need to do right now together because the whole world is doing it. That doesn't mean all the movies are worse. There's a lot of weak filmmaking techniques, and I've been getting into that. But the experience itself is what is kind of destroying things at this point. And then you combine that with the poor filmmaking techniques today, the writing, the ballooning budgets, putting so many things ahead of telling a good story first and foremost. And it combines to just destroy what we think of as the old school, big movie going experience that shaped the generation. So Gen X and older millennials even, we grew up before streaming, before smartphones, before constant distractions. We experienced movies with focus. We watched them fully, rewatched them endlessly, memorized dialogue, let them sink into us, become a part of us, become part of the pop culture, become part of your conversations with your friends and family. We lived them. And that shaped who we are and how we saw cinema and how we see movies even now. As someone who grew up in that era and went on to write films, direct films, and all that kind of stuff, I can tell you that experience was formative. It mattered. I can tell you that so many filmmakers today still reference those movies. They go back to those for a reason. They were so powerful, but they can't recreate it because they get rid of what those were. They have to try to reshape them for a modern audience and forget what made them special. And that kind of takes the soul out of what those movies were. Back then, they raised us. We studied them. We loved them. We carried them with us. Movies were not disposable things to us. We wanted to own them, touch them, discuss them, live them. They were absolutely formative to who we are and who we were. And this isn't a rant. I don't want you to think that. This isn't about saying, oh, movies are dead. I mean, there's still good movies that come out. Steven Spielberg's still making movies. The Fabelmans that he made a couple years ago feels like a movie from a other place in time. There are still hidden gems, but it's those filmmakers and directors who have the old school heart and only care about old school creative filmmaking where the story comes first. Like Top Gun Maverick, F1. These are movies that are made by the same director that has those sensibilities, things like that. But even though those kind of great films still exist, they're becoming fewer and farther in between. But the way we bonded with movies back then and experienced them together shaped us. So a lot of the movies that don't fit that formula, that kind of put all of these other things like watching for streaming first, checking certain boxes first, all these kind of things, putting messaging first above telling good stories that are entertaining and let you escape and live in another world. Those kind of just lose interest and they're forgotten and people turn off to them because they're not the type of movies that shaped filmmaking in the most popular eras in film history and the people like this generation that watched those movies at that time. It was unique, and that's absolutely worth recognizing the difference between then and now. So maybe we weren't just the last generation that was raised by movies. Maybe we were the last generation that was completely shaped by them in a way that felt shared. It gave us a commonality, a common ground that is lost today. And when you're raised together and you share the things together and everyone's beating to that same drum, this pop culture connects us and it feels bigger. It felt rarer. It felt communal. You felt that monoculture, even though that wasn't a word that you thought about to call it. You just knew everybody was living in those moments together, and that connected you no matter where you were from, what you looked like, anything. None of that mattered. We had that shared pop culture. And when you were raised in a time when you didn't just watch the movies, you grew up alongside them. And if you were there, I promise you remember that, and and it's something that you'll never forget. Movies weren't just something that we watched. They were something that became a part of you and who you are. And that's what I got for you this time. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, if you did, please like and subscribe. It helps out the channel. We do all kinds of things here. We do big, deep dive essays like this into filmmaking and film history and nostalgia and certain films, holidays, all that. But we do big movie recommendations lists, things like that, rankings, all kinds of fun stuff that has to do with movies and filmmaking and pop culture, because I love movies and I love sharing them with you and keeping that feeling alive, because it's there. I promise it's still there. And if you want to help support the channel a little bit more, you can join my Patreon. The link is below. You'll get your name and lights in every single video, behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking, special members only videos, and so much more. And everything helps the channel, and I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.